Shalom, shalom, Mishpachah. This is Yud Yao checking in. I just wanted to report really quickly on some strange things happening in the United States. Of course, you guys know that we're here in West Africa and we are kind of out of the way of some of this stuff that is going on in America. But of course, we have to also take precautions wherever we're at to also let people know that these things can happen, naturally or by design. Okay, so you may have seen recently in the news that there was a woman that ate an undercooked tilapia and ended up with sepsis shock, and which is an infection that goes through your bloodstream and affects your organs and your limbs. And then she ended up having to have her arms and legs amputated to save her life, right? Terrifying thing to think about, because I mean, who doesn't eat tilapia? Everybody eats tilapia all around the world. We used to eat tilapia from Walmart when we was back in the United States. But everybody eats tilapia, and we still eat tilapia here in West Africa. So you still do have to be careful. You still have to make sure you wash your hands, and if you get anything going on, to make sure that you get on top of it, or you're monitoring it very closely. But this woman ate this fish and got this particular bacteria that caused her arms and legs to fall off, right? And so when I saw it initially, I told myself, okay, well, that's weird, right? Because you don't necessarily hear about this happening all the time. It's a little bit weird that, for one, that it's major news all over the country, and that they're reporting on it, coming out of California. I just thought it was strange, right? So then I wake up this morning and see victim number 2, right? There was a boy, 14 years old, who had, again, a sepsis shock of some sort, and he had to have his hands and feet amputated. Now, when we saw one, and it was a strange thing, you give the one off, right, to say that, okay, well, this is something that happened, it's a strange thing, this is a one-off type of deal, so you're not going to probably see this again as major news. But when we see the second one, within about a week, a second case, where a boy has had his arms and legs or hands and feet amputated in the same way that this woman had, then you want to start standing up and paying attention, because there's something going on. You may get a one-off, a one-shot occurrence, but if you get two, especially in the same month, same couple of weeks, you want to start paying attention, paying close attention. Because why? Why do we want to pay attention to this? Because we know that COVID was an engineered virus, and we know that the COVID vaccine was engineered to be the other side of that engineered virus, right? So it's a 1-2 punch. They engineered the virus, and they also engineered the vaccine, and both of them are poisons. We know this for a fact. So, since we know that the world governments are capable of releasing a deadly virus on the public, then we need to watch in the media for any uprisings or upticks of anything that seems strange that's going on, in health, because this is how they attack, right? And so we started to look up, what was going on in both of these situations. And please pray for these two families, because we don't know what's really going on with them. And now their lives are completely changed by what's happened. But what it looks like is that they've released some sort of flesh-eating bacteria, again, because they've done this before in the past, some sort of flesh-eating bacteria into the waters around the United States, in California and in Tennessee, and also in New York. So I want to show you guys this thing, and I'm going to try to keep my desk, because my desk is very junky, off of the camera, right? I'm going to try to keep it off of the camera. And I also got to close my bookmarks, so the people who are nosy won't be looking at my bookmarks to try to see what it is that I do for a living. Let's try to get it down out of out of sight here, out of sight, out of mind. All right, so can you guys see this? And hopefully you can't see my bookmarks. Don't go trying to chase me around. So you guys see this, right? If you're familiar with the channel and have been keeping up with what's going on in the world, you'll know and recognize what this is right away, right? It's one of the Illuminati cards, right? So you use the word Illuminati and all of a sudden people start laughing and snickering and try to, downplay whatever it is that you're about to say. But if you know anything about this Illuminati card deck, you know that it came out in 1994, and you know that some of the things that are on the card, in the card deck, have happened, right? If you follow my video, you'll look at the epidemic card, which predicts COVID. You look at the 9/11 card, which predicts 9/11. You look at the Pentagon card, which predicts the Pentagon. You even look at the Pentagon attack on 9/11. You even look at the ELIZA card. And remember, we talked about this in Drone War 4, that there is an ELIZA card that predicts the rise of deadly AI way back in artificial intelligence, way back in 1994. So these cards are actual terrorist plots that they put into the public conscience for whatever reason, right? And so we pay attention to them. And you see one of these cards is called the flesh-eating bacteria. And as you guys saw, the bacteria was eating his arm. And we now see in the media that 2 specific different cases of people with their arms and legs that have been amputated because of this particular bacteria, because the bacteria was eating, the arms and legs of these victims, right? And so this is a big deal because it tells us that this is something that they either have done or plan on doing, right? And so now we see 2 different cases from 2 different places. And so we don't say, okay, well, it's a slam dunk. This is absolutely what's going on because of these 2 different cases, because they're 2 different cases. Again, it could still be a coincidence. So we go and look a little bit deeper, a little bit further into what's going on. And so we found something. So we looked, and apparently the name of the bacteria is called Vibrio vulnificus, right? And it's a flesh-eating bacteria that thrives in warm, it says brackish water. But we found here 3 more deaths in New York and Connecticut. It says has caused the death of 3 people in Connecticut and New York since the beginning of July. So here it is, September. So since July, and it also talks about a 4th person who the bacteria was found in his system in New York. So at the most, 6 people in the past 2 months have caught this bacteria and either lost their arms and legs or have died, right? And so is this above what you would normally see? It absolutely is, because when is the last time that you heard this thing happening to people, right? And so what is also interesting about what we found here is that on one of the articles that I was looking at, there was an article that was posted in August, almost exactly a month ago, August 22nd, about the cases in New York, right? The 3 cases in New York and Connecticut where the people have died, where the people have died from this particular bacteria. Now, the person who reported on, or the person who was interviewed by this particular author on this website, Everyday Health, the person who was interviewed was a guy that, his name is William Schaefer, and he is a professor of medicine in the Division of Infectious Diseases at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville. And this has been a month ago. And this woman came and asked this doctor about this particular bacteria that these 3 people in New York had got and died from. This seems strange, right? For this person to be reporting on something in New York, but ask a doctor down at Vanderbilt in Nashville. They don't have any infectious disease doctors to speak for the New York, for the Northwest. Seems like that's a bit far to go to get an interview about something that's like that, right? Just so happens the boy that caught the flesh-eating bacterial disease that lost his hands and feet was treated where? Vanderbilt University, right? Is that a coincidence or not? It could all be a coincidence, of course, but I don't think so. So you ask about an infectious disease specialist at Vanderbilt University about an infectious disease that hadn't happened yet when you asked him. But now there's a boy that catches that exact same thing that you were interviewed about prior and loses his limbs from it. Is that strange to you? That not only do you have potentially six people in the past 2 months that have either died or been maimed because of this particular thing, and then one of those people is at a place where they had already discussed that very thing the prior month. It almost seems like that there is a controlled release and that they're actually asking people who are somehow involved in the controlled release of this particular strain of deadly bacteria. You have to look at it this way because you have to understand that these are terrorist plots that are being hoisted on the world. And we know that based on the history of COVID, with the present history of COVID, the current history of COVID, where we just recently had an infectious disease to be released on the world. And now we have what appears to be the beginnings of another one. Now, I was talking with my wife about this. Think about the differences between COVID, an outbreak of COVID, and an outbreak of flesh-eating disease, right? An outbreak of flesh-eating disease will scare the life out of you. If you had problems getting a vaccine before, do you see what I'm saying? This may be the push that people need to say, I don't want to get this flesh-eating disease. Let me go ahead and get the vaccine. Do you see what I'm saying? This is serious stuff. Not only because of that, because they are telegraphing it. They're telegraphing that this is something that they plan on doing, that they have in the works already. Remember, these cards are from 1994. And if we see these things happening now, because the card depicts it as an attack. It depicts it as a terrorist attack in the game. And then when we see it just occurring, sound like a grown man's voice downstairs, and it shouldn't be. But when we see this thing occurring, all over the United States and then kind of in secret, because they didn't let us know that the woman in California had the same bacteria as the 3 people in New York. That nobody's making these connections, right? That 3 other people have died from the same thing in New York. You see what I'm saying? That's 3,000 miles difference between San Jose and New York. That's a long way for this bacteria to be just traveling. You see, if the woman in San Jose caught it from a piece of tilapia that she got at the market, she had to get it from the ocean and the Pacific Ocean. If the people caught it in New York, they had to catch it from the Atlantic Ocean. So you're looking at a bi-coastal release, right? Is it naturally occurring in both places to whether it's going to affect both these 2 different groups of people at the same time? And then you haven't heard about it for years. Because remember back in the 90s, we had a similar thing that happened. The flesh-eating bacteria came up back in the late 90s. And everybody was really worried about it. Do you guys remember in the late 90s when the flesh-eating bacteria was a big story, that people were catching it and dying, and that it was strep? There was a type of strep throat. So you guys be careful out there, because it appears that this thing is happening now in the United States. Now, you're not going to get, a big, huge story on it to say, okay, well, you need to be careful doing this, doing that, because they've released it and they're trying to get people to get it, right? So you've got to be vigilant yourself to make sure that there's certain things that you don't do, knowing this is out there. And it seems to be centralized in the United States. I'm in Africa, and Africa is known for wild diseases, right? People get malaria, people get typhoid. I've had typhoid. I haven't had malaria, but my kids have had malaria. But we've been able to treat it. We've been able to identify all these different things very easy and take both natural things to get rid of it, and then, medication to get rid of it as well. So here in Africa, you do have things like this come up. I haven't seen any cases of flesh-eating bacteria, but you do have things like this come up. And it's more common coming in Africa because, it's third world here. You don't have the access to, top of the line medical facilities and treatment like you would in the United States. So why then is all of these things happening in the United States and not here in Africa? Or why are there so many deaths and lack of treatment to where that it goes that far to take your arms and legs and not here in Africa, right? Because you're not hearing about that here. Okay, so this is just something that you guys want to keep an eye on, that this flesh-eating bacteria is more than likely and has more than likely been released in 3 places in the United States. That's California on the West Coast, that's New York on the East Coast, and that's Tennessee in the South. That's an attack, y'all. Okay, all right. Y'all be vigilant out there. Shalom, shalom.